what is archiving? There are certain essential principles of archiving which remain the same across mediums. Whether we are talking about theatre archiving, or we are talking about cinema archiving, or we are talking about music archiving. There are certain principles which remain the same across various mediums. Now, so, as with most other things, we have to answer those whys and hows and whats and so on and so forth, some fundamental questions which give you the most fundamental answers. And without touching upon them, you keep groping in the dark. So heritage, museums, and such other exhibitions, they have a different role to play. But when we talk about archive essentially has to be looked upon as a repository of memory. Memory, something so important for human beings who are social animals. We contend with personal memory, we contend with collective memory, which in other words is also sometimes looked upon as social memory. We contend with historical memory, and we eventually talk about archival memory. Now, what are these repositories of memory? Archives provide a very, very reliable evidence for examining our past, our traditions, our culture, and so on and so forth. It is not as if they exist in a vacuum, they have no value, they have no use, and we do it just because we are very sentimental about our heritage, about our culture, and so on and so forth. Archiving of any such event which brings together people from various cultural strata, nationally and internationally, is so important because it creates different registers of memory. And 50 years down the line, when one of us, if we are alive, we want to look at certain aspects of our culture, our performative traditions, and so on and so forth. What do we turn to? Well, there's a very famous sociologist, Milton Singer, and he says the great traditions are carried over, are transmitted through essentially records which are available in different forms. While in the ancient times, the records were available in what forms? Either the written scriptural forms or in the forms of, fine arts, traces of fine arts that still exist. And the little tradition, which was an unwritten tradition, was handed over, transmitted across generations. The oral tradition was transmitted across generations, and this is what has been the element, the instrument of our memory. The little tradition has passed on over generations through the oral tradition. The oral traditions of storytelling, for example. The oral traditions of performance. So therefore, it is important to investigate. It is important not just to investigate what we do, but also how we do, what was done, and how it was done. I'll give you another very simple example. I have a photograph in my house. That photograph is of the marriage procession of my father's marriage. May he rest in peace. But this photograph is 72 years old. That's when my father got married. and it's a black and white photograph, and as you can imagine, totally sepia tinted now with all these years that have gone by. And you know, my late father-in-law, who was a historian, I once showed that photograph to him, and you know what his response was? The very first response, he was a historian. He said, "My God, this photograph is a social document." And I realized, I decoded the importance of what he was saying, because in that photograph, my father he came from a peasant family, essentially a peasant family, a rich peasant family, and he was married into a darbar. My mother came from a small time estate. So the whole marriage procession was going, and everybody in the marriage procession, from a little child to grown up people, they were wearing the same caps, Prasad, which you people wear in Maharashtra. आज की तारीख में हमारे यहाँ कोई वो टोपी नहीं पहनता है। पहनता है बच्चू भाई? कोई नहीं पहनता। Nobody wears that topi, and everybody except for children, everybody is dressed in a dhoti and kurta. Now, that is the value of just a photograph. That is the value of just a photograph. And there are, of course, photographic archives, which again serve a very valuable purpose. When you want to look at what society was like, as you investigate it through literature and through various other records of time. But when you actually want to get a visual sense of how things were, what things were, then you essentially have to return or turn to an archive. Today, fortunately, with the advent of new technology, we don't have to bother, we don't at all have to bother about the physical space, related to archiving. Because today, I'm sure it is possible that what is being shot right now, of course, that editing element will have to be factored in. But if you don't want to factor that in, if it is just a single camera operation, you can immediately put everything onto the cloud. But we also have to be careful. There might be the danger of the doomsday lurking in the horizon. And God forbid, someday if this bloody cloud is lost, what do we do? Therefore, most archivists are given this suggestion that do not destroy the source material. At that, I will end my opening address.